everybody, come on, everybody, come on, everybody.
I'm a rapper, I'm not a poet. Poet, I'm not a rapper. Guess it's opposite there, cause you niggas just got it backwards. Got me sick to my stomach. Go up on my lantern. New trio is Frio, the most terrible tandem. Deliver shock value, but no, not Timberlanding. Critical observation alerting you ambulances. Clap on and clap off. Rap on and rap off. Hard times for hard rhymes, that concrete, that asphalt. If I did look twice, I guess that's her asphalt. May I assist you and score, get my pass out. Matter of fact, it's what you need. Need some rest, you just fatigue. See, technically I'm filing Mrs. Wallace, I'm Rashid. Know this beat is a banger. Have no reason for anger. If I'm slightly deterred, you know I'm giving the finger. I'm a savage like Corey, but not in need of Topanga. Right like 90 degrees, you in the need of an angle.
Welcome to the Free Lunch Podcast. This is your boy Tight, and I got BG with me. What's going on, BGZ?
What's happening there, Free Lunch Podcast? What's going on, Tight?
What's happening, man? You know what they say?
Yeah.
They say the best part of waking up is Folgers in your cup.
And now the Free Lunch Podcast in your cup. Early morning recording, man. Fall has set in. The weather pretty nice around this way, man. So I'm excited about another opportunity to do what we do.
Yeah, man. I'm over here sipping on some Pike. What is it called? Pike Place? Pike something. I don't know. What
is it?
Some coffee.
Coffee, bruh. You drink coffee, man?
Got to.
Gotta have it. Gotta have that caffeine injection, huh?
I do. You don't drink it?
Man, I do not fool with no coffee, man. I never have been able to do it.
Hey, so Malcolm X got a quote.
What'd he say?
The media is the most powerful entity on earth. They can have the power to make the innocent guilty and to make the guilty innocent. And that's power because they control the minds of the masses.
And that is the media 101. That is the honest to goodness truth, man. And the crazy thing about it is that media is controlled by a select group of people. It's really controlled by the same corporations and stuff. So, you know, they are able to use that as a way to push across whatever agenda they may have. Panic, you know, having the whole country scared about whatever they want to do, whatever they want to push the button on, put it in the news, put it in the newspaper, and it forms how the people see stuff, and that's power.
So for today's podcast, similar to what a MC would do when they get behind the mic, can we kind of freestyle today?
Let's freestyle it.
So to the audience and to the listeners, you know, we have a topic and we're going to kind of stay on topic, but rather than putting together an agenda, we're just going to freestyle today's conversation and kind of give you guys an idea of how when we're preparing and prepping for a show, how we kind of brainstorm and we go in different directions. But I think today's topic is going to be, it's very relevant and it's very interesting into how there's similarities between one world and reality. Mm-hmm. So with that being said, let's just go ahead and get into it, man.
You gonna do it like that?
Yeah, and I'm gonna give them the vine though.
Oh, okay. You know, I was worried, man. I thought because we ain't working with no script today that you had forgot.
Oh, I'd never forget that.
I feel better now.
That's what the people asked for.
I feel better now. I got a little nerve. My heart started me like, oh no. But yeah, okay. You good then. Let's get to him.
I'm living in the 21st century, doing something mean to it. Do it better than anybody you ever seen do it. Scream from the haters, got a nice ring to it. I guess every superhero need his theme music. No one man should have all this power. The clock's ticking, I just count the hours. Stop tripping, I'm tripping off the power. 21st century, schizo, man. The system's broke, the school's closed, the prison's open. We ain't got nothing to lose. We rolling. Huh? We rolling.
Yeah.
With some light-skinned girls and some Kelly Rollins.
Dog, you killing with this rap shit.
Hey, I had to give him that.
You're killing with this rap, boy. You on a rap roll.
I don't know. I got that.
Kanye West, huh?
Yeah, but in so many ways, I think that song can relate to kind of what we're gonna talk about today, and it can because they say no one man should have all this power. You could use that for the type of people we're gonna talk about today, how much power they have, or we can talk about how in that song and in those lyrics they talk about the schools broken and the prisons open and the system broken and just how we really need to put some structure around just what's going on and in the world of professional sports and just the lack of education for the athletes as well as the way that the media has the power to portray different groups and different audiences and really can decide on the innocence and the guilty of a single individual. So that could be that one man that has all the power. It could be the media. It could be the star athlete that continues to repeatedly do the same thing and try to get away with it because he feel like he has too much power. And then the system is broken just from the perspective that it's, in a lot of cases, it's just the same rights and the same privileges that one group of people receive are not given to another group of people. So you still have that oppressed group that's misrepresented by the most powerful entity on earth, as Malcolm X called it, the media.
Big thing with that is that power is just so top heavy. It's like it's only one group or one select set of people that possess what we call power, and it's not equilateral. The power is not spread amongst all the peoples. The Panthers motto was all power to all people. So everybody having that equal share in being able to determine how things move and outcomes. But power is so top heavy. And we talk about professional sports, only the owners, so-called, might have power in certain situations, in certain areas of decision making. And like you say, players have a certain degree of power if based off of their accolades and what they've been able to do and the amount of money that they make. And there's this discrepancy between who's in position to do what, and it all rests on that perception of power and who has it and who has the ability to control and manipulate certain things. It affects people who may not have as much power, how we see things and our perspective and how we gain access to certain information because we don't possess that same quote unquote power as the people that determine it. So, and if we talk about professional sports, as we're going to talk about, there are so many parallels between what we're seeing in the NFL and the NBA, how those organizations and associations are handling issues within their leagues that really reflect how things are going on in everyday life for the average man.
Well, let's just give the people a quick just give them a quick break into how we come up with these different topics. So for this particular topic, it was one of those ideas that you came up with where you kind of essentially mentioned we could talk about how the athletes and how society is portraying the athletes and in a lot of ways how the athletes are, or how that's a direct reflection of what's happening in Black America. So it's actually so many different directions we could go with this particular topic.
True.
Is it one way that you want to start off with in particular? I know when we were kind of throwing out different ideas, there were four individuals in particular, right? So you got the Ray Rice story, which essentially has become the label for domestic violence. You have Adrian Peterson's story, which has become multiple. I mean, you can pretty much label Adrian Peterson's name with multiple things as far as one in regards to child whooping your children. And then the other idea when you think about Adrian Peterson is just the multiple kids he has. I heard somebody talking about Dwight Howard today, how Dwight Howard, not today, but this week, how Dwight Howard has 8 different kids from 8 different baby mamas. And then you have the Joseph Randall. This young man is the one that stole some underwear and some Test cologne from one of the Dillard stores. So you got these particular four athletes, and in a lot of ways, you know, they've been highlighted, and they've been the media has really, um, you know, shown that store or that side of the store. So that's one direction we can go in and just talk about how, in a lot of ways, those could be microcosm of what's happening in Black America, where there is unfortunately domestic violence, and that's an area that we need to address in Black America. There is this idea of single father of households with no fathers growing up, where you have a dad that has multiple kids by multiple ladies, and then you do have this problem of stealing that needs to be addressed. So that's one side of how athletics is a portrayal of reality. But then also you have this side where you have the owners, and how you have the Irsays of the world who was out drinking, and he's actually, for those that don't know, he's the owner of the Indianapolis Colts, and how he was out drinking, and really you haven't heard much of his story or what happened with him, and how the media played a role in kind of, not really publicizing his trials and his tribulations like they do the African American athletes. So it's so many directions we can go in. Choose one.
For me, it would be the Ray Rice thing, and that touched me on a lot of different levels. And Ray Rice is a former Baltimore Ravens running back that had the video in the elevator with him basically knocking his then fiance, now wife, out in the elevator and dragging her out and all that stuff. And when it finally made it to TMZ and made it on the news, the awareness of domestic violence went through the roof, and everywhere you turn, you heard about Ray Rice this, Ray Rice that. And it was just interesting that when we actually got the information, the actual event had happened several months before. So we actually got the information late. But when we did get it, it was a total circus in terms of how the media handled that. Now, in no way do I condone domestic violence. Don't condone what he did in terms of hitting the woman and everything that surrounded that. And we should all be in situations that we should keep our hands to ourselves, especially if we're in a relationship. Never be drawn to the point of having to use physical violence or physical harm, and even mental abuse towards a person that you're in a relationship with. But the funny thing was that when it all hit the fan, it's like the NFL didn't know what to do. The NFL was caught in the middle. They of course they wanted to not do anything to Ray Rice because he's a star of the league. He was coming into the football season, getting amped up and ready for it. So no way do you want to lose one of your star athletes, one of your star revenue generators. But then on the flip side, because it hit the airways, because it hit the news, and it was in the American public's face, and it was an act of domestic violence, the public was putting pressure on the league to do something, right? And it was just funny how the league, I guess, in its haste to do something, started covering up things, started not releasing the truth and fully disclosing what was going on. And it just really identified that there is just this disconnect between morality, what you're going to stand for when all the chips are down, and then this drive for money. And it's like when the NFL finally did come to terms with what they were going to do, it came off as like they were making a moral stance against domestic violence. They were standing up for those organizations. They were partnering up with domestic violence organizations. But at the end of the day, what they really were doing, what they were trying to save endorsements and save revenue streams, because if they didn't stand, if they actually stood with their player and said, you know, he made a mistake, we'll make sure he gets the appropriate rehab and all this kind of stuff, but we're not going to do anything against him if the judicial system, if he doesn't go to jail, we're not going to do anything with him. We're going to stand beside him. But if they did that, they will stand to lose a lot more revenue. So instead of that decision that they actually made in terms of suspending him from the league, when you look at it, it really wasn't one of them morally standing with the fight for a fight against domestic violence. It really was a fight for them to preserve their self and preserve their image in the public eye. And it's just funny how, as an athlete, you can give so much to the game, you can give so much to generating these millions and billions of dollars. But when you get into a situation to where you need the organization to stand with you, you really find out how much your true value is within that system. They'll do away with you, kick you to the curb, and find somebody else to replace you.
But I mean, at the end of the day, Ray Rice has to also understand, though, and I kind of like the direction we go in then, because we can go so many fronts on this particular case. But in the Ray Rice, he has to understand that he's not bigger than the league as well. So yes, the NFL did make a reactive approach to something that they were unfamiliar with, and it may have been, and I would agree with you that it was strictly driven based off of dollars. You know, it wasn't so much about it. And I would say that there was a percentage that was concerned, but I think to your point that the dollars drove the reactive approach and the resolution that was given from that situation. But staying on the Ray Rice story, you know, there were multiple things that I kind of took from that particular story, right? Mm-hmm. So on one case, you have the individual within itself and the actual car and the actual event. You know, domestic violence is something that needs to be addressed in the African American community. You know, so that's one thing. The second thing I took from that was some of the idiotic, stupid, for lack of a better word, text messages that were coming from other athletes. Mm-hmm. And it kind of brought perspective as to it brought me a different perspective and walked me down this this lane here. But you know, these athletes, I mean, one of the people in particular was the Paul George text. I don't have it in front of me. For those of you that are interested, you can always go Google it to see what Paul George had to say. But in a lot of ways, he was standing behind Ray Rice, in which you should never publicly, especially if you're in that position, make a public stance on either side of the fence. You know, you should, in my opinion, kind of just keep your personal feelings and views to yourself and allow the system to work itself out. But we got to remember that in a lot of these instances, these star athletes are 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26-year-olds. Right. And I think we forget, number one, that they're children or young people or young adults. And number two, I think we forget that these are not Rhodes Scholars. Mm-hmm. Not all of them. Some of them are. You know, you got the stories of the Rhodes Scholars and the guy from Florida State, I forget his name off the top of my head, that was literally a Rhodes Scholar. But a lot of these young people go to school for a year, 2 years of college, graduate early, and then they get thrown into a world that they've never experienced before, where it's millions of dollars. And at that point, they have to surround themselves with people that don't know them, and they have become a business. and it's just hard for them to know how to maneuver and operate in those kind of situations. So we have to, in a lot of ways, put into perspective that these athletes are, in some instances, they are. I think we've elevated them because of their stance to think that they are also the most brilliant and smartest people. And I'm not saying that all athletes are dumb or what have you, but if you read some of the Twitter messages and some of the Facebook messages, I think that brings you back to reality that some of these people just strictly have the athletic ability. And I think
Really?
that's another lane when we talk about the system being broke. How, if we want to use the professional sports world as our example of how there should be things in place for these athletes to continue to educate themselves and to help these young people that have come from situations to really help them to become better people. And it's really like the school system, right? In a lot of ways, the school system is broke because of how archaic the school system has become. So, and then the third part, I guess, and then I'll turn it back over to you, was in the whole domestic violence case, and you touched on that as well, is how the NFL basically covered themselves. So they basically, whether it was because of domestic violence or if it was because of the business dollar. I'm pretty sure the NFL will say because of domestic violence. I'm sure business analysts would say it was a combination of the domestic violence and as well as the dollar bill. But I think that all three of those are different stories simply coming from the Ray Rice situation. And I think the one that hasn't been discussed has been the one of how these professional athletes are can really shine a light on some of the challenges that are happening in Black America.
Once upon a time, if you look at a story, say like the Motown story, Motown Records, influential music company, especially for the African American community in the the 50s and 60s and that particular time period. If you listen to some of those stories that come from the artists that were on that label or people that were around it, they'll always talk about artist development. For anybody that was going into the music business, you signed on with a record label, that you were going to go through a period of artist development before the public really knew who you were. You were going to learn about handling the media. You were going to learn about stage performance. You were going to learn about production, all of the things that you needed to know to have longevity and to be able to sustain yourself as a person, as a brand, as you went down your journey in the world of entertainment. And you were talking about this in terms of having to come to grips with the fact that a lot of these guys that are making this money, that have this particular status as it relates to being world-class athletes, superstars, and things like that, fall in this age group to where their brains really haven't fully developed yet.
No, they haven't. Just imagine when you were that age.
That's what I'm saying. I made this put this statistic out before, but the studies say that the human brain is not fully developed until you're about age 25. The first part of your brain to develop is your kind of your reactive component, the component that you use to do something right now, your action and your reaction and how you respond to a certain stimulus. That develops first, but the part that develops last, that does not fully develop until 25, is the part where your discernment comes in. The part of your brain where you look at a situation and you pause and weigh between the benefit and the risk of whatever action you're about to take. So these guys don't really have that that part of their brain fully developed. And it makes sense when you see certain things going on and how and their behaviors in certain situations. And it's like, well, man, that didn't make sense for him to do that. But he's operating as a kid.
Perfect example is Jameis Winston right now.
Lord have
one of
mercy.
the most, excuse me, one of the most highly talented quarterbacks since Andrew Luck to come out of college. One of the most anticipated athletes that'll be coming out of college. And on the field, amazing talent. Off the field, there's some maturity that's needed there. But Jameis Winston is going to be a millionaire one day. And from what has been reported of him, he's probably one of the smartest kids, one of the smartest athletes in years as well. He got accepted into Stanford, so he's not a dumb person from how he's portrayed and reported, but he's immature, and you're gonna have a a person like Jameis Winston that's going to be a top 5 draft pick, probably number 1 when he comes out. That's going to be given millions of dollars. He goes from being a man to a business man, as Jay-Z would say it, and at that point, he gets elevated and he gets elevated by the media, and he gets taken to a place where if he makes a single mistake similar to what he's doing now, he's going to be broken down. So when you're paying an athlete that type of money, you're paying them millions of dollars, you would think that there would be, and I'm pretty sure there is some professional development courses and areas that are taken, but you would think that the NFL and the team that drafts him would put more and invest more in him as a person. To me, that's a microcosm of what's happening in America today. That we don't. These are not even. Just imagine if you have NFL, NBA, these professional sports teams that are paying these athletes millions of dollars, but aren't willing to invest everything into that person to make that person a better person. Whereas you got these African American students that are growing up in these underprivileged neighborhoods that are essentially experiencing the same thing, and they're not even $1 million athletes. And so imagine how much the state or the city that they're growing up in is investing in them. So to me, in a lot of ways, we should really look at these situations that are being portrayed by the media, which is really highlighting it, and it's really highlighting some of the deficiencies within the own African American community, even though the way that it's portrayed by the media is disproportionate to the way it's portrayed by our counterparts, being the Irsays of the world and these different owners, the Jerry Jones of the world who had the stripper picture that was taken. So that's the kind of my thought process when you think of athletes and athletics and how that plays a part in society. I really believe we should look at these situations and really try to understand what's happening, because they are a direct result of what's happening in the culture that these young people are growing up in.
For these institutions, so we talk about the sports leagues, NFL, NBA institutions, and look at that in comparison to state governments, federal governments, municipalities as institutions as well. And what it is, it seems to be a weighing between long-term investment and right now profit or right now benefit. So for the leagues, you talk about the professional development and putting money into making sure that if you draft a guy or you're preparing to acquire someone to come into your team, that you're willing to put whatever resources you need to put behind that particular person to make sure that they are psychologically stable, that they have what they need to operate in the world that you're about to bring them into. You're willing to invest in them right now as they're coming in, so that when they go down the road and they start playing for your team, that you've lessened the likelihood of them getting into some type of situation because they are lacking, like you say, some psychological therapy or economical therapy. If they got family issues and all that type of thing, you're investing in that person's global need to make sure that they are able to reach their maximum potential. Same thing for states and federal government as it relates to youth, especially in majority Black communities. Invest in the educational system. Invest in the schools. Put the dollars in the schools to making sure that kids have what they need. It don't necessarily have to be these astronomical things, but just make sure that they have decent facilities, decent books. Make sure the teachers are being paid the money that they need to give them incentive to come in and teach the kids. Have after school programming, community programming, give the kids something to do versus and invest in them long term versus the short term profit. We'll just build prisons, set this thing up to where, a kid can have a small amount of weight, he go to jail. Now we're getting jail time off of them in states and stuff, and whoever privatizes the particular jailing facilities gets paid off of it right now, because we say, well, we'll just take our chance with a kid just living out here in these streets, following whatever cycle has been set before him, and we'll get paid right now because of his shortcomings and his failures. That's the comparison right there that I see as we talk about how willing are the people that are in these positions of ownership, so to say, running institutions and entities. How willing are they to really look into the overall health and well-being of the people that go out and work for them every day? How loyal are they to those people?
But you touched on it, and a lot of it, the psychological piece, right? And when we talk about the educational system, and when we talk about the educational system, to me, the education is archaic, it's dinosaur, it's extinct, it's old, and there has to be more ways to really educate and understand. First off, you have to understand the student. You have to understand what's going on in their everyday life. Once you can understand what's going on in their everyday life, then you can provide for that individual. So, for example, when you talk about these professional entities and these NBA and NBA and investing in these athletes, paying these guys millions of dollars, but are they doing psychological tests and understanding what happens in these young people's life growing up for the 20 so years that they've been on this earth, and understanding, okay, these are some of the challenges that this person takes. Let's help this person. Let's address these issues with this person, And likewise goes for the educational system. When you go into these less fortunate neighborhoods and these oppressed areas, for any color, for all color children, how much investment psychologically are they putting into these kids to understand some of the things that they're seeing on a daily basis? But not to even go too far into this, I think that you mentioned the Ray Rice. I still think that we need to have that discussion on that other piece. And we have a large female audience, and that's that domestic violence piece. That's a reality in Black America.
That's a reality in America.
In America.
Mm-hmm.
That is a reality in America. And that's something that is absolutely wrong. That's something that shouldn't happen. For those of you that saw the TMZ tape, that was just absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah, that was despicable, man.
It was. And where is that type of behavior acquired? I've never hit a woman. And, I sit back and I reflect and I try to just really get into the root cause of what would drive someone in that situation to respond the way that Ray Rice responded. Whereas when Jay-Z was in the elevator with his sister-in-law, he was able to hold his composure. what's the psychological mindset between those two different individuals that causes one to respond a certain way? Is it alcohol? I don't know.
Yeah.
Is it alcohol involved? Is it seen growing up in a household where you've seen that before?
Mm-hmm.
So that's another area that needs to be addressed just based off that one tape. Is where's that mindset come from that gives him he was comfortable too with doing it and didn't feel any type of way.
Yeah, it's multifactorial, and looking at it, it seemed to be comfortable for both parties on the front end in terms of the way that they were interacting. It seems like that they probably, just based off of those few minutes in the tape, seemed like they had a history of confrontation to that degree to where she felt comfortable, walking up on him that swiftly and him putting his hands on her. So it made me believe that was a comfortable space in terms of how they related to each other in the situation of being on different pages, or being in disagreement, or whatnot. But you asked the question, it's multifactorial how a person gets to that point. One is just pure rage to where you just black out. You so mad, you so angry that you just black out and you lose control, and you haven't been to that point of training yourself to remove yourself. When you feel yourself.
Stop right there. You said something that just rung a bell with me.
Uh-huh.
It comes with you just black out your train. We are talking about athletes. So think about that. If your job day in and day out is to get out there on the football field and to hit someone and pound someone daily, and then your responsibility off the field is to turn that off, to decompress, turn that off, and become a human being in our society, that's a challenge within itself. So that also goes back to, by no means am I labeling this situation on the NFL, but that goes back to this whole psychological piece that you talked about, where you need to see these professional organizations and these football teams invest in that personal development on that psychological to help these individuals decompress.
Because it's a real thing, man. You go out there and you are a running back or just a football player, period, and that's what you do all the time. You're practicing, you're training, you're taking that punishment. You do have to mentally get to a certain place to be able to do that day in and day out, and you get into that routine, not making excuses for it, but that is a real thing. You look at soldiers, you look at people who go into these tense situations, and that's their life. Like, you have to get into a certain frame of mind to be able to function in that world. And then to, like you say, turn that switch off just in a matter of hours and all that kind of stuff can be hard from person to person. It could be harder for one person to do it than the next person. And so you do have to be mindful. The league has to be mindful. The people around these particular persons have to be mindful that this guy might be working on a short fuse. So I either need to learn how to maneuver with this person, or if it's going to be problematic and consistently problematic, I probably need to remove myself from this person, because my thing is, I'm not expecting that person to change at all. So I got to make the decision on how I'm going to handle the situation. And that's a real thing. This whole, PTSD and this combat mind and all that type of stuff does play a role. So that's one thing that draws that line. Well, how does he get to that point? The other thing would be that whole age thing that we talked about. Jay-Z, 40-something years old. And this guy was, 27 or something like that? So that's another thing that probably put Jay-Z in a better situation of knowing that this is his sister-in-law, this is his wife's sister. He probably seen her blow up before. So he's able to say, okay, well, she can't really whoop me for real, so I'm just going to restrain her. I'm not going to do anything to hurt her. That type of thing. He's able to go in that place of his mind to think the whole thing through, thinking about the possibility that I wonder if he was thinking about the possibility of it might be in some cameras on the elevator. Has he been conditioned to say, look, no matter where I go, I'm probably under somebody's lens. The spotlight is probably on. So whenever I'm out here like this, I'm going to do my best to not create a moment in time that might show up in TMZ. He might even be thinking about that kind of thing because of the heights that he's reached. And environment, no doubt. If you've grown up in a situation to where you've seen people in relationships fight it out, and that, like you say, that exists, man. That exists in all of our communities, white and black communities, all groups, especially in this country that we know about. It affects us. And if you've seen that and that was the way that it was, where you come from, unless you've had some type of intervention or you've talked to somebody or you've seen the light, it's a good chance that that's how you're going to handle issues when you run into them, the same way that you've basically learned how to handle them.
That's a reality, and that's true. Yeah. I mean, we didn't even touch on the other stories, right? You got the Adrian Peterson and him whipping his kids. You have the Adrian Peterson and Dwight Howard with kids from multiple women. You have the Joseph Randall. Anything you want to say about any of those stories?
Man, let's talk about Adrian Peterson and them whoopings.
Well, let's talk about it.
Let's talk about that. Another thing that's definitely common in my household. Like, I've taken my share of whoopings as it relates to being disciplined for me doing something that I was in the wrong with, that I had no business doing. It's a part of our culture. If you talk to people that came up where we come up from and we had this conversation, it's like, hell yeah, I got a whooping. It wasn't no such thing as time out in my house. It wasn't no time out.
But the perception that's being portrayed is that we got it wrong. Even though for me, I was whooped. And I remember those days and I remember those whoopings. And in my eyes, I didn't see anything wrong with it. I feel like it actually made me a better person. You don't read about me in any type of going to jail or any of these issues that are being discussed in the media. And I feel like that's a direct result of the discipline I had growing up. But if you talk on the contrary, if you talk to the person against it, they would say that we got it wrong. That you shouldn't have to spank a child to get your point across. And there's really in this situation, to me, there's very little gray area. You have one group that actually totally agrees with it, with whipping a child, which I do. On the contrary, you have the other group that says that it's wrong, and for some reason, that other group's voice has more power than the group that's been whooped, because that's evident by the disciplinary actions that are taken upon Adrian Peterson. Adrian Peterson had to go. He has to go to these classes now about whooping your child and these counseling sessions about the issues with whooping your child. But the question I pose is, do we know what the child was doing? Because what if he was trying to do something harmful to his sister? Or what if the child was trying to do something harmful to to themselves? And Adrian Peterson disciplined them so that that individual wouldn't hurt their sibling, or they wouldn't do anything harmful to themselves that could potentially take themselves from them. So I kind of, again, I grew up, I got whoopings, and I feel like they made me a better person. But on the other side of the fence, you have the person that would say that's what my words are a direct result of what happens from someone that gets abused.
in, in my opinion, there's a difference. There's a difference between child abuse and discipline.
I agree 100%.
In discipline is that you're using some type of action to correct the behavior. So it's teachable. It's a teachable moment. And at a certain point, like when you're at a certain age, you as a parent, you can't negotiate with a 1-year-old or a 2-year-old. I mean, you can't tap into them going to timeout and really thinking about what they did wrong and thinking that whole process through and then coming up with a way on how they're not gonna do it again. You taking a chance. You might have a bright child that is able to grasp that concept real fast, but the more immediate response is that if you do something bad associated with pain, with any species, with any animal, associated with pain, and then they're less likely to repeat that thing. You look at you just look at the response. You say, okay, well, you do that, I'm gonna whoop you. You do it, you get a whooping. You're gonna remember that whooping. I still remember whoopings to this day that I've gotten. And when you get close to whatever it was that you was doing the first time, whenever you get close to doing it again, you're gonna be reminded of that pain that you felt. And then you get to an age to where you don't have to get whoopings anymore. That's the whole thing. That's when you know that it's been effective. You know, we got to an age where we probably was getting whoopings on a consistent basis, but then you get to an age to where you don't have to get whoopings anymore. But that foundation has been laid. We get to a point to where we get older, we get into our teens. We're physically bigger than our moms. We're physically bigger than the people that were giving us these whoopings when we were 2 and 3 years old. But you ain't gonna try them. You're not gonna disrespect them. You still kind of got some fear of what might happen to you. Even though you could physically do it, psychologically, you ain't gonna do it because you know that pain that was brought.
But what's interesting to me is when this was first reported, and this just shows you the disconnect between groups of people, whether it be race or whether it be culture, that's just misrepresented in the media and just not understood by a large group of people. And in a lot of ways, that the people that are misunderstanding it are the ones behind the mic, are the ones that have the influence and the power that Malcolm talked about. Because if you go back and listen to the interviews, Charles Barkley was the only interview that kind of provided a perspective on the whoopings. Again, I'm not going to get into the discussion of whether that was abuse or not, but I am going to continue to stay on the discussion that I got whoopings. And you know, you listen to one of the persons that I recall was on the Mike Greeny. You know how he basically crucified Adrian Peterson, and basically, you know, just essentially stated, you know, he don't believe in whoopings. And so that's fine if that's what your belief is, but just understand when you're talking and you're communicating that there is a group of people that believe that whooping your child is okay for disciplinary reasons. So because your belief is different than the belief of another group of people, rather than crucifying that individual, just accept to understand that, just agree to disagree. And if you really want to become an advocate or something, understand the other side and the other perspective. But point being is that you get these certain media talking heads that have the power and the influence to essentially direct the conversation and the language. So Adrian Peterson goes at that particular point, and on those particular days, he becomes just this horrible individual. And that's because you have a group of people that are on the other side of the fence that have all started to take a stance, and they've essentially changed the pendulum of how child abuse and how whoopings have become child abuse and how they're seen across America. But if you go back and listen to Charles Barkley's interview with Jim Rome, where he kind of breaks it down, where he essentially admits that he got whoopings, and that's the Southern culture. And so what I'm saying is to your point, there's a difference between child abuse and a whooping, but don't try to take and say that a whooping is child abuse. Understand the other side of the fence and really provide that Charles Barkley perspective into the conversation. Don't just have a one-sided conversation where you then assassinate somebody's character, i.e. Adrian Peterson, and then he becomes this villain for who knows what, trying to discipline his child for who knows what that child was doing that was inappropriate.
And I'm just going to put this on the people's mind, not to really push an agenda, but just to think about it. The face of crime, we say that black has now become the face of it. And then you look at these two situations, domestic violence and child abuse. Seems like Ray Rice and Adrian Peterson became like this face of or scapegoats with these particular things. It's easy to pin domestic violence on Ray Rice. It's easy to pin child abuse on Adrian Peterson. And when you looked at for the weeks that followed those particular stories, you know, every news channel was covering it and talking about it, right? And when they have these panels, they compose these panels of people talking about domestic violence and all that kind of stuff. When they had the experts that were chiming in and giving the percentage and the statistics and talking intelligently about, you know, the numbers and the demographic data and all that kind of stuff, all those faces were white faces. The people that were talking about it from an expert thing were white faces and doing all of the analysis. But when they were going out and they were looking for former athletes that may have had a case of domestic violence, or people that were victims of domestic violence, or people that were in child abuse cases, all those people that were either victims or culprits in those particular cases were black faces. So to a person looking at it, you'd be like, okay, well, this is a black issue. This is what's going on in the black community. As if it just started with these two guys. Let's pin it on them. But you look at the organizations that are against domestic violence, the organizations that are against child abuse, fighting those things on a day-to-day basis. Them organizations were set up in the 70s and the 80s. So who was the face of these situations back then? Can we get some former white athletes that might have had some domestic violence issues? Can we get some white child abuse victims? Can we mix it up a little bit so that global perception is not that this is, oh my God, this is what's going on in the black community. How dare that? They're so brutal. Can we mix it up a little bit? Can we get some black people speaking on the expert panels? Can we get some black people to come in and talk about, well, look, where we come from, this is the line. This is what is child abuse. But this is what is discipline. You can go over the line and just be excessive and brutalize a kid. You can definitely do that. But most parents are not doing that. Most parents are spanking their kids to let them know that they've done something wrong and to hopefully encourage them not to repeat those actions. If it was so bad, we never would have had corporal punishment in the school systems. Did y'all have that where you went to school at, where the principal might paddle you?
Yeah, we did.
But America has gone so soft. I don't know who decided to do that, but we've gone so soft and we've gone so far away from the things that really make sense that is hurting us on the back end. These kids, once they get to 12 and 13, they don't have any fear of anything.
This is true.
They're ready to go. That's why they're fighting teachers. You know, they see this culture on the outside, and even when they come to school, they're able to get away with the same thing with no true repercussions. You're just gonna suspend them, send them home, or send them to some student adjustment program where they're outside of the class. That's not really corrective action based off of where we come from and what we've seen to be successful for people that have gone down the road. And I'm not telling people how to parent their kids. I'm just saying what has stuck with me and what I've seen has, benefited people close to me. But just that whole perception thing and the way that the media handled it, crucified those guys as if they were the only ones to ever commit these type of actions, and not really reflecting a true story and really showing how this thing is affecting Americans, regardless of where their race is or their ethnic background is.
This is true. Basically, point being lack of diversity at the higher level to provide that other perspective on whatever that issue may be. So, I don't know. I think that's all I got for today, man. Anything else you want? I mean, how would you summarize today's topic? Because it's, to me, I think that there are several ways I would summarize it. I would first summarize it to say that there's a direct correlation between athletes and how some of the issues that get exposed and highlighted can be a direct reflection of what's happening in America, whether it be we didn't even talk about Donald Sterling and how at that high level the racism that's presented, or at the Ray Rice level where how we kind of touched on domestic violence and how we touched on just these professional areas pouring into these athletes. We have these athletes that are in their 20s, and essentially we've crowned them as not only being professional athletes, but being Rhodes Scholars. And I think that we really have to put a perspective behind the individuals that are being crucified and whose characters are being assassinated by the most powerful outlet and the most powerful entity, the media, as Malcolm X would put it. So I think that at the same time, we have these stories about these athletes and how some of their trials and tribulations have become the demise of their success. I think they're microcosms of what's happening just in America, and we really need to dig deeper into the story behind the story. I think that, and the story behind the story is not always the surface level story. It's the tweet that was sent out by Paul George. It's the lack of education that where in areas where these people where there needs to be more education. So I think it's a lot of directions where we could have gone, and we can continue to go in this conversation. I would like to hear back from the audience and from the listeners to see what they thought about this particular topic and some of the in-depth that they would have liked to hear more of, just to get a perspective on how they view things. What you think? How would you summarize it?
Our biggest defense against being persecuted on these levels for the things when we talk about Ray Rice issue and we talk about Adrian Peterson and all those other things as it relates to our community, the biggest thing that we have is us. All we got is we, and it's going to take our community and the community that these young athletes, and all of the young people are coming from. It's going to take those communities taking these kids in, circling around these kids, teaching them and holding them accountable for their actions, and basically helping guide them along this process, because it's been made clear that when they go into these organizations, they go into these professional leagues, that they're going to be used for their athletic abilities and all those type of things, but everything else is not going to be accounted for. And when they get ready to get rid of you, they're going to get rid of you. If something happens and it looks like it's going to be shaky for their brand, they're going to disconnect themselves from you. But as a community, we have to prepare our young men and young women for that particular moment. If I'm that person's cousin, he does something crazy, I'm talking to him. I'm not trying to get any money from him. I'm not doing all that kind of stuff, the things that the rest of the world is doing to him. I'm coming and talking to him. And I'm sitting down and having heart-to-heart conversations about, dude, don't put yourself in situations like that. If you see something like that, go the other way. You gotta stay out of trouble. You gotta stay out of the line of attention. Handle your business and stay out of the way. Don't put yourself in any situation that you're going to lose. The community, we've got to be more connected, of course, but we got to be more engaged with our own issues and making sure that the products of our communities are protected and have a safe haven that they can come to and get positive advice, reinforcement, and all the things that they need to be successful. We've got to really do a better job of that and protecting our products and not letting them be taken advantage of and not allowing them to just become superstars and develop this mindset because they're great football players that they can do whatever they want to do, and somebody's going to speak up for them and get them out of that jam, because that ain't going to always work. So as a community, we have to do better in terms of holding, the people that come from our communities accountable for their actions, and then also being mentors and being positive role models for them so that they have something to look up to and aspire to be as people, not as athletes, not as superstars or entertainers, but just as genuine, good people.
And there you have it.
That's it.
So how can the people hit us up?
FreelunchPodcast.blogspot.com. Check us out for blogs and podcasts. Also, drop us a line on Twitter. You got any feedback or any topics that you would like us to discuss on Twitter, FreelunchPodC, as well as Instagram, Free Lunch Podcast.
BG, ain't nobody talking about this stuff, man.
Ain't nobody talking about it.
Ain't nobody talking about this stuff, man. It's these topics we coming up with and this New South movement. I'm telling you, the quality product that's being put out there really needs to be reinforced in communities and it needs to be listened to. So we're gonna keep recording, we're gonna keep dropping, and we're gonna keep trying to make a noise and bring a different perspective and talk about more than what's being talked about, whether it's on the media, where it's on social media, where it's in the reality TV shows. We got to keep producing. We got to keep putting these topics out there because the people need to hear it.
We ain't going nowhere. So whenever they ready, we're going to be right here giving them that Southern funk.
And that's exactly what we're doing. What would James Brown say right about now?
Bobby, I don't know. But what's inevitable is got to be funk.
And there you have it. The system's broken, the school's closed, the prison's open. We ain't got nothing to lose. We rolling. Huh? We rolling. With some light-skinned girls and some Kelly Rowlands. In this white man's world, we the ones chosen. So good night, cruel world. I see you in the morning. Huh? I see you in the morning. There's way too much. I need a moment. No one man shall have all this power. And we out of here. Peace.
Right on to the real. Out of here.
Pardon me, I'm speaking it awkwardly. Charles Barkley, barking, they ain't biting. I'm getting that green broccoli. Properly giving props to the problem, fulfill prophecy. It gotta be better than that. It gotta be obsolete. Obviously, niggas rolling the dice, and this ain't Monopoly. My purpose was to do it on purpose. Fucking apology. Go.